access fund, so that, high achieving students can get fully paid scholarships to private schools or to Catholic schools. Then you can get that tax write-off, right? And it's up to $75 million worth. The Chicago public school system has a very large chunk of that. It's meant to go statewide, right? But essentially what it is it's a de facto, it creates a de facto voucher-like system for high-achieving students in public schools. Now, what public schools rely on and what really makes public schools thrive is having students at all achievement levels to be able to learn together, learn from each other, take lead or be inspired by some of their more high-achieving students, because studies have shown that when you have a diverse student network, all of the students want to try to do better, and academic outcomes tend to be better. But when you peel away the high-achieving students from these schools, these public schools, and you take them and you put them in high-achieving environments where everyone is a high-achieving student, it's the neighborhood schools that really get hurt by that the most. Now, I'm not saying that high-achieving students should not have the opportunity to go to a Catholic school or to go to a private school if that's ultimately what they want to do. But if you're incentivizing this behavior to peel away high-achieving students out of public schools, it ends up hurting the public schools. And I'm not necessarily a proponent for that, especially when the state of Illinois needs so much money. And we are operating at a deficit. Our bonds are dangerously low in terms of status. Just the governor deciding to say, oh, we don't need this $75 million, let's just create the loophole and create this fund for students. So, I think that amendment, that amendment out of the couple that the governor made were just, not in the best interest of our public schools. And so, but SB 1 itself, before the governor got involved, was actually a really great step in the right direction towards parity in the way we fund our public schools.
Absolutely. So now the 25th district, what does that consist of in Chicago?
So the 25th district is a very long, narrow district along the southern shore of Lake Michigan. So it goes from 43rd Street south to roughly 122nd. The last street is 117th, but there's some parkland that goes further south past 117th.
Okay.
It incorporates, you're working our way from north to the south of the district, the neighborhoods of Kenwood, Hyde Park, Woodlawn, South Shore, South Chicago, East Side, South Deering, Calumet Heights, and a little tiny bit of parkland in Headfish. So it's very diverse.
Very diverse. And I agree, and that's what these students need, and they need some culture, they need some diversity. A lot of Chicago school systems, I know in Inglewood, they're supposed to be closing 4 schools in that district. And
that's a travesty. That is absolutely a travesty.
You know what, and I did a show about that on My Life in the Shots YouTube channel about, the different gang areas, and that they're going to close 4 schools and send them to other schools. So now they're going to have to walk and go to other rival gang areas in high schools. And a lot of the killings in Chicago, they stem from beef and issues from high school, and that's where a lot of times it starts.
Right. Yeah, the closing of all the schools in Inglewood is in fact a travesty. And, personally, my grandmother went to Inglewood High School. So Inglewood High School is one of the oldest high schools in the city of Chicago. It's historic. Nichelle Nichols is a graduate of Inglewood High School. And if you're a Star Trek fan, from back in the day, Nichelle Nichols was the only black woman and the first black woman cast in Star Trek, which was groundbreaking back in the 70s, right? And the 60s. So, for the Chicago Public School Board and the mayor of Chicago to consider shutting down a school like that, as historic as it is, to our history and to our communities, I think, it's just very wrong-minded and short-sighted. So yeah, and I've got a even more personal connection to what happens when you force kids to cross gang territory to go to school. Kids who wouldn't otherwise want to join a gang end up doing so for protection to get to and from school. And ultimately what that does is it forces children to make a decision for survival that's not in their best interest, that's not going to be really making them safer. It just puts them more at risk. And so, we, in our efforts, or in the effort of government to balance budgets and be fiscally responsible, I would love to have more in-depth conversations on how those decisions are intersectional with things like race and income in the city. And, Safe Passage as a program is great, but there's not enough of them to go around. It's not funded enough, quite frankly. And so, you can't cut someplace and expect, folks to just fend for themselves when this decision was out of their control, right? I mean, so, it's all the more reason why we really need to focus on strong leadership at the state level to ensure that the school systems across the state are getting the funding that they need to stay open, and to encourage students to stay in school and to combat school dropout, right? And help reduce those dropout rates.
Absolutely, reduce the dropout rates. And also, a lot of people think that what they're going to do by bringing this $85 billion high school in Inglewood is up the taxes on all the citizens. And in other words, gentrify the area as far as now. So now you got an $85 million high school. Now you got to fund it. So now pushing up the taxes on the people in the neighborhood, they can't afford it. That pushes them out and bring other people in. What do you think about that?
Well, so it doesn't quite work that way. I mean, yes, it is going to be tax dollars that are going to be used to build the school, and tax revenue will continue to pay down the bonds that the government will undoubtedly use to fund the building of the school. And that, if we find ourselves in a situation where our debt obligations are becoming too expensive, they may resort to raising taxes. And in a city like Chicago, that's what's called a home rule authority. They can raise independently property taxes without the state getting involved. So, and I think what some folks also don't, what is not common knowledge is that property taxes are raised by either home rule government authorities like a Cook County or like a Chicago, and also public school districts. So the school districts are who can also drive an increase or a decrease in property taxes across the state of Illinois. And in Chicago, it just happens to be Chicago. So, their decision to build the school and fund it through bonds and pay back the bonds is basically how a lot of government agencies and entities develop buildings or assets that are part of their purview. The residents, though, are supposed to still be able to participate and still be able to make full utilization of that school if it's in their neighborhood. If it's a true neighborhood school, it's not going to be quote unquote what's known as magnet here in Chicago. They should have full access to be able to attend the school. What does end up happening, though, is that new schools in that district, come property tax assessment time, could actually affect how a property is assessed.
Okay.
And then therefore, so the rate of the property tax doesn't necessarily change, but the amount of the property and how much it's worth changes, which then increases your payment annually, right?
Right.
So that's the nuance of government, and it's like, your average citizen doesn't, necessarily see it through this lens and understand it at this level of the minutia, right? Mm-hmm. So that assessment process then could actually raise the total amount due in property taxes. And now, That's where other government programs really come in handy, like assistance in property tax appeals, leveraging all of the discounts that you qualify for if you're a single parent, if you're a senior citizen, if you're on disability, all of these things and more can help reduce your property tax, what you owe in property taxes on an annual basis. But we don't necessarily, there's an information gap. So not everyone knows what they qualify for, and not everyone knows where to go to find out what they qualify for to reduce their property taxes. That's another layer of issues that eventually, will cascade or build on itself year to year to year, where we see folks literally taxed out of their homes, and that's unacceptable. Like, if we're building on our communities and building up our communities, it shouldn't also come hand in hand with pushing out people who have been there for generations and want to stay and live in the communities that they've spent their entire lives in.
Okay, so now the Clean Air Bill, a lot of people don't know exactly what that is. We haven't even really followed that in Chicago. Can you explain exactly what the Clean Air Bill is?
At the federal level and how it impacts the state?
Yeah, how does it impact the state?
Well, essentially, it sets up regulations and standards for the quality of air and the quality of the Clean Air and Water Bill Act of, gosh, I can't even remember what year it was now at this point, but essentially it sets up regulations and standards for our air and water across the country. And in the 10th ward of the 25th district, which has historically, been a very industrial area in terms of the businesses that used to be there. So the Ford plant, the steel plants, there's some other storage facilities out there that are, industrial in nature. But with that kind of concentration of industry, you also have pollution that comes out of big facilities like this. And so the fights that the 10th Ward has been engaged in recently are around the storage of things like pet coke and manganese that are powdery substances that when on a windy day in the Windy City will blow up into the air and now is being inhaled by the residents in that immediate area. The air quality control monitors that were out there up until, I think it was about 2 years ago, weren't enough, because independent studies of some of the children out there were showing higher levels of manganese in their system than any other children in the city. So a hard one and a hard fought fight on behalf of Alderwoman Garza or community organizations in the 10th Ward successfully put pressure on 2 companies out there storing manganese, and they installed more air quality control monitors to ensure that they were adhering to the agreements around how they store the stuff, how they move the stuff from point A to point B. And then in comes Donald Trump and Scott Pruitt, who used to be the head of the EPA up until a few months ago. But Scott Pruitt, what he did is decided not to rehire folks, and he also reduced the funding across all of the regional EPAs that are under the control or under the guidance of the federal government. So now in this region in particular, we're understaffed at the federal level. So there's not enough people monitoring our air quality, monitoring our water quality at the federal level. So what my goal is when I get down to Springfield, when I'm elected, I'm going to put it out there, I'm going to own it, is to look at how the state has historically funded the Illinois EPA and the Illinois Department of Natural Resources in order to beef up their capacity to do the work that the federal government won't be doing for us, because it is unacceptable for small children to be inhaling these sorts of things anywhere in the city, but particularly in the 10th Ward because of my knowledge and passion for my neighbors, obviously. It's unacceptable for these children to be breathing this kind of air. It's unacceptable for adults, but it's most harmful to the children. Yeah.
Yes. What about, okay, so now a lot of people want to know about what can we do about the violence in Chicago. Now, I know you're running for a House of Representatives. What, at your level, can you guys do as far as any bills to be passed about how to reduce violence?
So I think if you're a resident of the South Side or the West Side of Chicago, you know it's not just going to be one bill, right? It's going to be multiple pieces of legislation that are going to really address the violence in our communities. And I think the overwhelming thought leadership around this is that violence is is directly tied to economic outcomes. And so we need to create opportunity. We need to create jobs. We need to make available training to enter new types of workforces. But we also need to beef up and fully fund our public education so that the next wave, the next generation of the workforce is equipped for a 21st century, a 22nd century, a 23rd century workforce, okay? Because of federal laws like NAFTA and things like that, and trade agreements, right? We have moved manufacturing all over the globe, and it's not going to come back. Trump was lying to everyone. These manufacturing jobs, by and large, are not coming back, right? So what do we do then to help steward the next generation and equip the next generation? And then also the folks who are most directly affected, how do we retrain them? And the only way we do that is investing in our people. And right now, our public universities are underfunded, our public schools, K through 12, are underfunded, and our pre-K funding is underfunded. And it's not accessible to everyone, every child who needs it. And those are really the ways that we start to address that disparity and start changing the tides and the economic outcomes over time. It is not going to happen overnight, unfortunately.
Yes, and Trump ran off that economy, that we can build the economy from jobs, stuff like that. And it's not happening. And it's been proven. Coal mining jobs, they're not coming back, and that's a fact.
Well, I mean, the ones that were gone, no, but Illinois actually has a very strong coal industry. I mean, we export a whole lot of coal in Illinois. And so, as far as the coal industry specific to Illinois, it's actually doing a whole lot of mining. In fact, it's producing a lot, I should say.
Absolutely. So, and that's what, as far as I had T.O. Hardeman, who was running for governor on here, and and the same thing, economic development in our communities. And what happens is this: a lot of times we allow foreign-owned businesses to come into our community. They don't live in the community. They don't shop in the community. And so a lot of times we allow them to come into our community, take all the money and resources they don't hire from our community. So a lot of the young people from our community don't have jobs. So now they have to sell drugs to feed their families. And also 98% of us shop outside of our community. We spend $1.3 trillion a year, but however, we spend 98% of that outside of our community. And therefore, the business in our community fails. So the young people in our community don't have jobs. So now they're stuck selling drugs, having to rob each other. And that's when the violence comes into play. And then once someone gets hurt in the community, the businesses leave, our property value goes down, and that's the Chicago we live in. What do you think about that?
Well, I think we touched on this a little bit before. It's all about access to capital, and and making sure that that the state is addressing discriminatory practices on behalf of banks to ensure that folks who live in the neighborhood have just as viable a chance of getting funded for their business as somebody else who's just relocated here. or moved and decided to bring a business somewhere else, right? I mean, economic development is not simply just about, getting more fast food in an area. It's not just about more payday loans in an area. It's about infrastructure dollars. It's about holding banks accountable for their lending practices. It's about the village coming together and helping, a young person to make a business plan that a bank will fund. It's about it's about neighborhood security and making sure, that folks feel safe going to the store down the street if there is a store down the street, right? And historically, we have not, disenfranchised communities of the Chicago have not had access to the same amount or the same piece of the capital that's needed to start businesses, but we need to take a hard look at the lending practices and hold banks accountable for discriminatory practices. It's very much along the same lines of way back towards the end of the second wave of the Great Migration, where banks would redline, right? And they wouldn't lend to a family of color who wanted to live in a certain part of the neighborhood, in a different part of the city that they weren't relegated to according to the banks, according to racism, according to X, Y, and Z. So it's a similar situation. I mean, banks should fund good business plans, period. It shouldn't have to be a good business plan from a white person. It shouldn't have to be a good business plan from, a family who's relocated from India, all these other things. It should be parity. It should be colorblind, at least in the lending practices, right? So, and these are things that at the state level we can regulate, and we can put things in place to hold banks accountable.
Yes, and that's what we need. Chicago, someone that's going to hold our representatives accountable, because, in the African American community, we give our vote away to, just anybody. Like, look at, we got Bruce Ron in office. We got Emmanuel as mayor, Rahm Emanuel as mayor. And yes, and we do need to hold our state representatives accountable. Good luck to you, and I'm glad that you're running for the 25th District House of Representatives state. This is amazing. I found out about you on Facebook. I seen a lot of your ads. I thought they were amazing. I read your article on the Chicago Defender. It was amazing. I see some of the things that you stand for, and I thought that everything that you were doing was amazing, and that's why I'm glad to, have reached out to you so that you could come on and tell my viewers and listeners, everything that you stand for and why Chicago needs to vote for Adrienne Irmer.
I appreciate that so much. And it also means that my digital guys are doing their job. I love it. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to my community. I've spent 15 years in service to my community, and I'm really excited at the opportunity to scale that up and really, 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 really dig down into the issues in Springfield and make a bigger impact. Illinois can do better. And if you go all in for Adrienne, I promise to make sure that I steer the conversation to make us do better as a state.
Absolutely, and we must do better as a state. And a lot of rumors and a lot of people, Chicago has been known for corrupt politicians, and we need to change that and do better in that aspect.
That's right. I'm a servant leader. My job is to the people, and my duty is to the people. 100%.
Thank you, absolutely. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you. This is My Life in a Shot. For those of you who are on my Facebook, make sure you go to my YouTube channel and follow me on My Life in a Shot YouTube. We're on Facebook and YouTube Live right now. Democrat for Illinois State House of Representatives. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Hold on.